Hey everybody, here we are back in the Woodworking Wisdom Workshops. I'm sorry for the delay. We've had a few technical issues, but we had the wonderful Max, our IT support there, IT support even, helping us out, and we're back on again. So hopefully you can hear and you can see us well. So welcome everybody. So today we are gonna, for me, it's a fairly simple day really. We're gonna turn a bowl. The intention then is that bowl will be passed to Ben to do some carving and pyrography on. So a nice little day. So we've got Ben on questions today, and I've got Jason doing switching around of cameras. Can I get the thumbs up from Ben? Are we all okay? Wonderful. Right then. So thanks, like I said, everybody for waiting. Thank you for being patient. Here's our project. So this is a piece of really nice, actually, sycamore. And this has got quite a lot of rippling in. So we're not going to do anything in terms of color with it. We're just going to, I suppose, embellish it with what you've seen Ben do already. And we're going to make an Ammonite bowl or little platter. So if you've never seen an Ammonite before, these lovely fossils, and the area that we're in at the moment, down in the southwest of the UK, is rich with these fossils. You walk along the beach and you can find them everywhere you walk. So we're quite lucky. So my job is to create a very simple form, like a little OG form, quite a shallow platter, but leaving it thick. So Ben can then put it in the Pro Mount. We're going to use the Woodcut Pro Mount just because it's a nice way of holding something to work on. We use the Pro Mount then to mark it out, to create some that lovely pyrography burning that Ben does so well, plus carving as well. So for me, like I said, it's a bit of a breeze, hopefully. And we're just going to work our way through this platter. So I've already fixed it onto a faceplate. And don't forget, guys, you know the form. If you've been here before, you've watched us before, you know, we're a resource. Ask us questions. That's what we're all about. And today, because it's going to be quite nice and relaxed for me, it's your chance to get as many questions in. We use it as a Q&A session if you want to. All right. So the way we're going to start with this one, this is going to be the back side. The blank at the moment is probably thicker than I need. So I'm going to start off with quite a chunky foot, because there's potential that Ben's going to be sort of beating this with a hammer if he's going to be doing a bit of carving. I don't know how deep he's going to be going or anything like that. So I'm going to make sure that the foot's quite substantial. In fact, I'm going to hold the foot, or make the foot be used in this one here. This is the G-jaws there, gripper section. So you can see how big that is compared to the bowl. It's quite a big foot, but that'll give him some stability when he starts working it. So those are the jaws. So I'll create the back shape, the OG, the foot. We'll then do a little bit of sanding as well. So I want to get the nice, a nice finish on that. And then I can turn that over, and we can start taking the inside out. Probably, if I'm honest, taking probably about 20 mil, around about, I'll say 3/4 of an inch off of that one. Okay, so a fair amount. But I have got the screws in the top as well, and this has been a shallow OG. We've got to be mindful of those. Got some questions? Yes, Ben.
Okay. So we've got a question here from Martin. What size is that blank?
Let's have a look. I think it's about 300. Let me just double check that for you, though. This was a blank cut from a plank, so I never bought. Oh, no, it's about 250, so about 10 inches, Martin, that one. And it's starting off at just under the 3 inches thick, so around about 73, 74 mil. But we're going to take quite a lot away from that. I'll probably end up with a 60 mil blank. So about just over 1.25 inches, 1 3/8 maybe. Sorry, 2 3/4, 2 3/8, 2 1/4 is where we're going to end up. Yes, Ben.
We've got a question here from Warren. What's a good finish to make an end grain bowl waterproof? I've used rust-ins, but it didn't work.
You know, end grain bowls, if you look at the way tankards are made, or if you look at the way wine casks are made, they're made from separate pieces of timber. So, you know, where you're not actually using the end grain, so the bottom of the vessel will be side grain as well as the sides of it. And that's for good reason. It's so it doesn't move and you know, fail on you. and I'm making something waterproof, there is no way of using something sympathetic to the timber like an oil, or even in a lot of cases varnish, because they degrade after a while. So the only way I know is either heat treating it. So look at how wine the barrel makers make their wine casks, or coating it in an epoxy or something like that. If you can get a food safe epoxy, that is the only way I know of. Yes, Ben.
So the questions are coming in thick and fast.
Good.
Out of interest, what is the sorry, this is a question from Ian. Out of interest, what is the grit equivalent to the CBM wheel that you use when you sharpen your tool?
It's 180 grit. It is a fine one that I'm using. 180 grit, and that's the closest finish I've got to a Tormek finish. So between your aluminium oxide and the Tormek, really, it fits in the middle. But it's a real, it's really quite a nice, bright, shiny finish. So yeah, really, really fine.
And then a question from Jesse. Some make the foot of the bowl or platter quite small, say quarter of the diameter of the finished bowl. Some make the foot closer of diameter. Why and when is each appropriate? He wants to turn bowls and plates to use.
Right. Okay. So if it's personally me, I would take the foot away completely. I tend to use feet and recesses as hold points, but then make them disappear at the end. If you're making platters, plates to use, you need a very stable base. So what I would tend to do is make a sacrificial foot. And I'd make that sacrificial foot most of the time, certainly on plate size, so say 300 mil, 12 inches, I'd probably use something like a C-jaw, which is about a 55 to 60 mil external foot size. That's nice and small to not get in my way. And then make I would say probably at least half of the width in total, so 50% of the bottom of that plate, the foot. So then there's no rocking at all. If you look at a conventional porcelain plate, that's the size that the base would be. They're very, very flat. So I would go with that personally. If it's decorative, you can make it as small as you want as long as it stands up. But no, something functional as wide as you can get it.
And then the last one for now, we've got a question from Terry. How far was the offset on your necklace pieces last week? Right,
guys. Now, guys and girls, that's the third of the same question that I've had on that. So what I'm going to do, because it's in my home workshop, I'm going to measure it tonight, the offset from center, and we'll get them posted, or I'll tell you next time, but I'll speak to Tom and Lily, and we'll get them posted for you to see. If I do a little diagram, that'll give you exactly how much offset we've got. Okay. All right, good. Right, let's go. By the way, Lily's not there today, so we've got Tom, who's her right-hand man. He's going to be there just asking your other questions or answering your other questions in terms of stock and all those sorts of things. So it's Tom today in Lily's absence. Okay, so let's start truing this bowl up and start to look at our foot. Now you can see it a little bit wobbly there, a little bit lumpy. So all we're going to do first of all is skim that surface. I've put some decent size screws in. They're 30 mil screws. And size 4s. Okay, there is the screw size. So decent sizes, 4 of those in there. All I'm going to do now is just skim the surface. I just want to get rid of some of that lump, some of that sort of bumping. So I'm just going to skim the surface first. Now, if I just stop the lathe, that's a single pass. Let me just stop the lathe and show you what we've got. We've got the cut area and we've got the low point here. So you do enough of those passes and what you're going to end up with is a nice flat surface. It's not going to be a clean surface. It's going to be a flat surface. When I say flat, I just mean true. None of that undulation should be there. There we are. Already what we have is a nice finish. You can see, I don't know whether the camera can pick that out, but there's quite a ripple on there. We'll show the camera properly when I take it off the lathe in a minute, but it's a really, really pretty bit of timber. I'm not going to bother with the outside edge. It's running relatively true and not giving me too many issues. So I'm going to create the foot straight away. So I'm going to use my speed sizer and a set of dividers. I'm going to look on the speed sizer, okay, to dove G. So where are we? G all the way out here. It's got the letter G, and we want the I want the internal part of G. So I'm going to go internal because we're holding a foot to center, and that's my diameter for the internal part of that jaw. Well, then if I just make it a little bit easier for myself, put a little pencil dot on the center. Now, it doesn't matter. This part of the dividers doesn't need to touch center as long as it hovers over it. But the outside, this part here, this is going to touch the timber in a minute. So it must be touching the tool rest. And have it level or the back slightly raised. Never have your dividers like that with the back down. Otherwise, they're just going to grab and bite on you. So we want it just trailing on there. There we are. You can see, let me just highlight that with a pencil. You can see there that the amount we've got exposed. So let's go in with a parting tool now. Just start that cut. And this can be quite big. Remember, we're going to carve using this foot as a hold point. So that'll do. That's probably there. Looking at that now, around about sort of 8 mil. So over, well over a quarter inch. So you can sort of start to see that foot now. So this is really quite loud. If I was in my home workshop, I'd have my full dust visor on that supplies my fresh air, plus something to protect my ears, because this is resonating right through me at the moment. Yes, Ben?
Okay, so a question from Quentin. Could you tell him what size and grade mops you recommend, loose leaf and stitched, to run on the lathe with a pigtail?
Yeah, go for the softer ones. I think the softer ones are G's, but it's the soft ones that I'm using, certainly on the stitch at least. I find the others a little bit too hard, and you want a little bit of forgiveness when they're contacting the timber. So go for the softer ones, which I believe are G's. All right, but just double check that. The softer ones we need to use. All right. Yep. Okay. So a little bit more. Remember, this is a very soft OG that I'm making here. I'm not looking for a lot of depth to this bowl. The only reason my hand's here is to stop myself getting a face full of shavings. So what we were talking about earlier, this is a sacrificial foot. That foot won't be there when we finish. So I'm going to create a nice flat area. This is a usable bowl, so I want something substantial. So I'm going to create that flat foot and just come away straight. There we go. That's the actual, what I call the landing area. Let's just pop a little skew chisel in. Nice big flat face on that skewer. I'm just going to start off the main foot just by scraping gently, and this is side grain, so we can get away with scraping without tearing. And if you're using a skew, it's the equivalent of using a negative rake, to be quite honest. So it's a nice finish. What do I want to do now? I just want to tidy up that foot a little, make sure it's nice and 90 degrees. There we are. And then anything that potentially would come into contact with the chuck, I need to be true. So the bottom of the foot here. Again, just going to now rub the bevel so nice and clean. Right. So where we are at the moment, we've roughly shaped the bowl. Yes, there's an awful lot of waste here. That's just part of it. We want, well, by the time I finish shaping, we'll take a little bit more off of that. But that's what I want. I want a nice, simple shape. Or rather, that's what Ben wants for his carving and pyrography. Nice, simple shape. So let's tidy that up now. Because we were just using a pull cut, it's not the tidiest. Also, don't want any breakout. And at the moment, we've got a fair bit of breakout on this corner. So what I'm going to do is just do a push cut up through here, and then we'll clean the outside surface before we turn the bowl around. So get that tool rest nice and close. We'll work on our little OG. If I can turn the lathe speed up, I will. Get up a little bit. And now we're just going to do a couple of finishing cuts. Slow down when you get to the edge. You don't want to fall off the edge. Okay, so that was the main bulk gone. So let's do one more, just a nice little slither. And what I'm doing, I'm just monitoring how much is being taken off. I just want to do a little tiny cut, clean as I can possibly get it. And the gouge we're using is a 3/8 or 10 mil bowl gouge. There we are. So that's enough. That's going to give us a really nice surface, already nice and shiny. Again, I don't know whether the camera can pick that rippling out, but it's a huge amount of rippling just up this side. Yes, Ben, we got a question.
Okay, so a couple of questions. First one, how deep is the foot?
The foot depth looks to be about 10 mil. Let me just measure. About 3/8. Well, a bit short of that, so we're around about 9 mil. So yeah, just short of 3/8. But because of the jaws we're using, I could get away with half that. We could double it, you know, if you weren't sure. There is no, I want to say there's no rule with the size of feet. There's several factors though that you have to think about when you're positioning a foot. If it's sacrificial, the jaw size obviously that you're using is the important bit, but that has to be in relevance to the diameter of the bowl and your ability. And a lot of people forget your ability bit. So if you're a beginner to wood turning and potential is that you're going to get a few more catches than the next person, make your foot big. Make it big as you can get it. Have a lot more contact area. So if you do get a catch, then it'll hold the catch without flying off and hitting you. So that would be my first port of call. Yes, Ben, again.
And then a question from Daniel. So with green bowl turning, what's the best way to dry the wood after rough turning?
After rough turning, it depends on what part of the world you're in. So if you're in a part of the world that's really, really hot, humid, then you're going to have to protect them a lot more than, say, for instance, I will, living in the southwest of England where it's wet, cold and horrible. So what I would say to you, if you're in a hot area, then PVA it, certainly the end grain, and store them somewhere cool, out of this direct sunlight, and it doesn't get too much wind blowing through or temperature change. Things like greenhouses obviously are a no-go. But yeah, somewhere sort of a wooden a stone building, bottom of the workshop, out the way of all the drafts, that sort of stuff. Wine cellar, I always say. Wine cellar or spare cave are the perfect place to put your bowls. Yes, Ben.
Okay, so a question from Steve. He's going to be getting his first lathe, the Axminster 305. Which would be the best chuck for that?
305 benchtop machine, isn't it? So I would go for the SK100. You have the SK100, and even the starter kit, it's got the C-jaws with it. You've got a screw chuck, you've got a faceplate ring, you've got everything you need to go. I wouldn't go for the 80. The reason I would say that is the 80 is a bit small for that lathe. The 100's perfect, because then you can even go up to some of the bigger jaws, like the grippers that I'm using here on the 114. So I would definitely say go for that 100. Yes.
And then a question from Michael. He's looking to get a set of turning tools, but not the beginner's set. What would you recommend, Colwyn?
So if you get a set, like a box set, then you'll tend to find that your bowl gouges are going to be a bit shorter in steel and handle. My advice would be to go for individuals. If you don't have a benchtop lathe, that is. If you have a benchtop lathe, go for a box set, because the steel and the handle's a bit shorter and it doesn't get in the way. But if you're on a lathe like this or a bigger machine, I would go for individuals. And the Axminster range here, these all good Sheffield steel. No, I mean, these are the ones that I'm using here every day. If you wanted to go to a slightly harder steel, then maybe go for the PMs or the M42s from Crown. They're a nice one to use. Do you know, most of the tools, in fact, all of the tools that you see behind me, starting from the hobby, the craft range here, I have no issues with. The only thing I would say, like I say, when you replace them, you want to go for something a little bit longer, which again will mean that it lasts a little bit longer for you as well. So that's the reason that I would then upgrade to something a little bit more of the Sheffield steel sort of quality, like all of these. Yes.
Okay, so we've got a couple more. So this is from Chris. Hi, Colwyn. I'm making a clock from cherry, but having trouble with sanding scratches and cracks appearing when sanding.
Okay.
Heat checking.
Yeah.
Is cherry particularly prone to this, and any tips to avoid it?
Fruit timbers are going to heat check an awful lot. So is any exotics, if you get them hot. So it's a couple of things here. First of all, make sure you get the best possible finish off the tool. So resharpen before your final finishing cuts. So you want that glazed, burnished finish. Make sure your abrasive is fresh and stick for a decent amount of time with each grade of abrasive. So if you're on 100 as your start point, that's got to take away any tears that you might have, any turning lines that you might have. When you go to 150, you have to take away the previous sanding marks, and the same all the way up through. I'm going to show you now how to alternately sand. So hand sharpen and then rotary sand. Hand sharpen, rotary sand. So you're crisscrossing your abrasives, and that makes it a lot easier to see when you've got rid of the previous sanding marks. So if you're sanding in one direction by hand, then you use a rotary sander that crisscrosses that, you'll easily see the previous sanding marks until you've got rid of them. So that would be my advice there. Heat checking comes from over sanding. So it's using either a dull bit of abrasive for too long, or just staying in one place for too long. So don't fold your abrasive over and over and over. Keep them folded over only once, because then your fingers can pick up any heat that you're getting from it. And that means that, if it's too hot for your fingers, it's going to be too hot for the timber.
And then a question from Rob. How do I get faster at turning? Is it just practice, or is there a way of taking bigger cuts?
I wouldn't even consider it. It happens naturally. Don't try and get faster, because that's when you'll have an accident. You've got to put the hours in, basically, and practice. If there's something that you're particularly struggling with and you think you're slow at it, just keep practicing. Skew chisel comes up an awful lot. Bead rolling comes up an awful lot. Those sorts of things. Don't force yourself to become faster. It won't happen. You'll just end up with lots of accidents and broken tools.
And now a question from Richard. He has an SK100, and he has locking screws on it, as does his faceplate. And he noticed that you never tighten them. How much do they matter?
Depends on what you're doing, Richard. So these locking screws here, that's what we're talking about. Now, if you're going to run your lathe in reverse, then they matter a lot, because if you do, what will happen, that thread will just undo and the chuck will come off. So if you're turning in reverse, so reverse turning, sanding, that sort of thing, then absolutely lock them up. Otherwise, I never bother. They it's running against a thread. The only time it could be an issue is if you have a particularly heavy or big piece on the lathe. Before you do any turning, you turn that machine on, then turn it off quickly. Then just with momentum, they could undo. So if you're at all unsure, just pinch it up. But no, normal circumstances, you'll be absolutely fine.
Okay, so
Okay,
they keep
yeah.
coming in. So
Okay.
we've got plenty of questions here. Can the cryo, sorry, this is from Marcus, can the cryo in M42 steels be sharpened on an ordinary white grinder stone?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Any of the, it's still high speed still, so you won't have a problem. Yep.
And then, do you happen to know if any of the Axminster jaws will finally fit on the Vic AM 100 chuck?
No, they won't. I say that to everybody that's got a different chuck. Your jaws for a Vic mark are designed for a Vic mark, Axminster for Axminster, one way for one way, record for record, and so on. I have heard just through chat that some accidentally fit on others, but general rule is no. So I give that answer to everybody. No, they're not designed for it. They don't fit it. All right.
Which leads us on nicely to a question from Mark. What about the jaws on the SK100? Are they compatible with the SK114?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Now, that's different because that's the same make, you see. So what you have on both the chucks, you have a slideway, okay, which is exactly the same. So the width of this slideway is the same. The scroll is the same. And so what you have then is what we call an accessory mounting jaw. Okay. Okay, these are two separate profiled jaws here. So we've got a cylinder jaw and then a dovetail jaw. Now this is the one that was designed for the SK100. And this is just a slightly longer one that's designed for the 114. However, they both slot into to each other's chuck and are easily used on the other. So I could put my one for the 114 in the 100 and vice versa. So yes, no problem at all there. How many more, Ben? Should we carry on for a minute?
I think we're good for a moment.
Right, let's get some turning done before many more come in. So lathe speed to 0. Make sure nothing's touching the tool rest. I'm just going to skim the outside edge and then we're going to do a little bit of sanding. So lathe speed to 0, like I said, I've checked everything. Just going to skim to get a true edge and I'm keeping it straight. There we are. So my actual edge, this is going to be left quite thick. So again, probably around about 10 mil. So Ben has got a decent amount to carve and give some shape and some structure to the outside edge. So all this up here is actually waste. It's not needed for this bowl, so we're going to get rid of that. But look, this is the surface that I can now sand, but we've got such a lovely finish there off the tool that we can start a little bit finer than I normally would. So I'm going to start at a 150 and not 100. The 100 can stay on the table. We'll start with a 150, 240, 400. And then in between that, we're going to add some rotary sanding. I may not need to use all of those discs, but there I've got a 180, 240 and a 400. So we may not need the 180. So I'm going to put the dust extraction on. It is a little bit noisy, but if you've been watching these streams before, you know that I should be able to be heard. Ben won't though, so we won't have any questions while I'm sanding, but this won't take very long. Tool rest out the way. Banjo out the way, of course. Now we'll do a little bit of a tickle with the 150. So this is just taking away any of the turning lines. And I don't believe the back of this one's going to be carved in any way. So this one wants to be nice and clean. All I'm going to do in a minute is just check to make sure we've got rid of those turning lines before I move on. Let's do that outside edge. Double check. I'm going to go for a little bit longer. we are. So let's go. You can't quite see them, but this is now full of rotary lines. So the coarse lines. So we want to get rid of them with this rotary sander. So this is just using the momentum of the bowl to rotate. Of course, you can use a power sand. They're a little bit more aggressive. There we are. And at that point, you want to stop. Stop the lathe, check to make sure that all your circular lines have gone, and they have. So now we're down to 240. Go back to hand sanding. Same thing, we want to make sure the rotary sanding lines have disappeared now, before we move on to 240 and 400. If I'm honest, I don't tend to check after that first initial sand. There we are. So now look, we're already up to 400 grit. Let's have a look. This is absolutely spot on here. Don't need to worry about any finer. I'm not going to go to the rotary sander now. There's no lines left there. So that's done. Let's get rid of our abrasive. The ripples, you can't quite see the ripples, I don't think. You can just make them out of the top here going this way. But without the light on, which we will do for you in a minute, you can't really see them. So that's done. This is the important bit. I've got the base started here. This is sacrificial. Okay, so now we can start thinking about the inside. So let's just remove that one for the minute. And I just want to show you, if we go overhead, well done, Chase. I'm hoping that we can pick up that ripple. Now, the unfortunate thing is I'm not going to put any finish on this because Ben's got to do a lot of work on it. So you won't get that ripple pop that much. If we were putting color on it, then that ripple would pop out very, very quickly. But no, it's a stunning bit of timber. Yes, Ben.
Okay, so we've got a few questions here. First one from Robert. How do you recommend safely getting rid of the epoxy shavings from the lathe?
I'm really thinking hard to say something responsible. Apart from, I mean, I think wherever you are in the world, or even in this country, you need to check what your local, the local council take and won't take, and ask their advice. To be quite honest, I mean, at the end of the day, I treat it like a plastic, and you have to, you know, we're all very responsible with our plastics. I would treat it exactly the same way. Once it's hard, so once it's not liquid, even eco-epoxy, it won't degrade. It is a plastic, so it has to be treated in the same way. And I would tend to put it with your plastics when you recycle. That was the advice I would give. In terms of shavings, if they're mixed up with wood shavings, then you're going to have to be quite careful with that, because a lot of the time, like the epoxy shavings, wood dust is treated like a hazardous waste because it can be fairly explosive. It's certainly very combustible. So you would need to check. You know, we're fairly lucky in my household that we're on talking terms with our bin men. So we have asked, and they just said put it with the regular waste and it'll be sorted. So you're going to have to check where you are. Yes, Ben.
Okay, so James has a wet bowl blank from a neighbour's beech tree. It's about 300 millimeters in diameter. Can he use the 50 millimeters jaws he's got, or should he buy something bigger?
300 mil.
300 mil and a 50 mil jaw.
50 mil jaw. It's a bit small, if I'm honest. I'd probably go to something like a gripper because it's going to be wet. It's going to be quite soft. And I would imagine you're going to get quite a big bowl out of that as well in terms of depth. So I would probably go to something bigger. Maybe something like a Dove H. Now, an H jaw, I don't have one to show you here, but they're a serrated, very deep jaw. So their internal surface is around about 55 mil. So just over the 2 inches, but you have a very deep section and they're serrated as well. So I think it's around about 12 mil, about ½ inch deep. So that would probably be a good one to go with. If not, that's something like I'm using here, which is the big G jaws, and they're internal on those. I'll measure that for you a second. Internal on those is, so what are we on? We are on 3.5 inches at the optimum size, so that might be a good option. That's Dove G. Yes, Ben.
And then a question from Michael: is there an ideal speed for sanding?
Well, there probably is. There probably is. My upbringing was production turner. That's what I was taught with, and so we didn't turn the lathe down. We just moved around that bowl quicker. So my advice to you would be, if you're turning something big like a bowl and it's checking, get the lathe speed down. If you're in an area where you're creating too much dust or your dust extraction isn't sufficient for what you're doing, turn the lathe speed down. All of those things are going to minimize dust, but minimize heat as well. The smaller you go, the faster you can go. As soon as you add water, burnishing creams, you're going to have to slow down as well, otherwise you're going to get covered in stuff. My general rule for myself is I carry on going quite quick to get the job done. But if it's a student or beginner turner, then lathe speed down while you sand. Lathe speed down whilst you sand.
And then a question from Martin. He says, "Hi, Colwin. He notices that you admit the 320 grit when sanding. He learned about not having a difference greater than 80 in between. And he would like to know why you leave out the 320.
Probably because I can get away with it a bit more. I certainly wouldn't advise doing it if you're having trouble with standing marks. So again, going back to training, production, we had to get the job done quickly. So we'd be quite aggressive and quick speeds when we're sanding. That sort of stuff meant we can leave out a grade so the job was done quicker. But that's not something I teach at all. It's just something that I tend to get away with. That will only work if you've got your sanding nailed. So basically what we were saying earlier, make sure your abrasive's not worn too much. Make sure you hang around enough time with each one. Saying that though, sometimes, timber's like sycamore's a bad one. This particular piece has been really kind to me. But sycamore's a bad one. Walnut's another awkward one. They tend to show scratches quite a lot. So I would put in the extra grade, the 320. Just to give myself an easier ride sort of thing. But no, it's just what I can get away with. If I can't get away with it, I'll do rotary sanding, and that massively helps get rid of the scratches. If you sort of intermix that with your hand sanding, you'll find that you can probably ditch a couple of grades. All right, then lathe speed to 0, because I've changed so much on there now, making sure nothing's touching the tool rest. I need to be just below center because I actually need to cut that center point. Make sure everything's tight. Lathe speed to 0, turn the machine on, and then away we go. There we are. That's 1,000 revs. So back to our bowl gouge. I'm going to drag cut again. So pull cut. And there's quite a lot to remove here. If I just take this outer cut down to where we need to go. And that's just shy of where we need to go. So there's quite a lot of timber that needs to come away. So what we're doing there, apart from making a pile of shavings on the floor, is we're using or cutting the timber in the direction that it wants to be cut. What I mean by that is you've got side grain and you've got end grain. And if you attack the end grain all the time, it's not only really, really hard, but that's where it generates the heat as well. And a lot of the time you're cutting against the grain. Until I actually start cutting into that bowl, I'll be cutting against the grain. So by cutting down in the way I did, that was all that soft side grain, and it really likes being cut. So I was getting away by removing all that stock quite quickly because of that. Now I've got to this position though, I'm going to start cutting against the grain. I need to start getting some shape. So just this first section. Just ease off a little bit. When you get to the, that last little bit, if you're pushing really, really hard, what you'll find is, in fact, I'll do it for you, it'll bust out. And if you bust out at the bottom of a bowl when you're particularly thin, you could actually rip the bottom of the bowl out. Next few weeks, well, I say next few weeks, next few months, couple of months maybe, we're going to look at what happens when you go through the bottom of the bowl and what you can do to recover, sort of, what we can do with the bowl afterwards. Yes, Ben?
Okay, so we've got a question here from Brian. Do you know if the SK100 chuck and the 250mm button jaw combo would fit on the AC305?
AC305. Off the top of my head, no, I don't. So email that question in and we'll research it and we'll let you know tomorrow. Okay.
And then a question from Colin. As you had to remove so much material, why didn't you start with a thinner blank?
This is what I had to hand. I wanted this particular piece, the only bit of sycamore that I had. And when I'm bowl turning in general, when I'm demonstrating bowl turning, I'll always start off by saying, don't let the size of blank dictate the design. I wanted a bit of sycamore. This is the only sycamore that we had at the time. Okay. It looked quite rotten anyway, so that's the one I went for. And yeah, I mean, this is a design that we needed. I didn't have a thinner blank available.
Sorry, this is a question from Nick. Would you not consider parting the excess off, as the wood grain is so nice? No, definitely not. Not on this piece. It's a little bit too deep. I could have run into more problems than not if I parted off. So no, not for me on this occasion. And definitely not, before anybody thinks it, there may be a few people out there thinking it, especially if you don't know, you certainly would never go to a bandsaw with anything like that. Okay, don't even think about that one. You'll have your fingers and hands potentially cut off. So don't try it. Okay, so that's just answered the other question. Right, okay, yeah, don't try the bandsaw, leave the bandsaw alone. Okay. Well, I'm going to turn the speed up a little bit more. Now we've lost a load of weight. So another very, very simple OG. You get to a certain point where actually I can't go any further. That cuts pretty much to his maximum. So I'm going to take a second cut. And stop just before I get to that first one that I've done. I'm going to pinch the thickness, decide whether I'm happy with that thickness and whether that's enough for Ben to carve. And I'm looking to Ben for approval. Yeah, he's nodding. So I'm going to leave that. Now I can do a little bit of that side cutting again.
Now, the other thing here, we got a very, very flat bottom. So if I carry on and, and cut downwards into this bowl, so make quite a deep bolt, we'll end up going through the bottom of that one. This is a flat functional piece. So I'm going to come around nicely. I might swap for a sharper tool in a moment. Let's just stop and see how our finishes. I want as good a finish on the inside as we had on the outside. Yeah, that's fine. Again, we'll do some side cutting. So the ability to be able to swap between a pull cut and a push cut are really, really important. Right, we're just going to swap to a sharper tool now. So pop that one to one side. I've sharpened both my 3/8 gouges in preparation today. Right, I'm just going to check that to see. Look with your fingers as well as with your eyes. Your fingers will pick up the lumps and bumps if there are any. Yes, Ben.
Okay, so we've got a question from Andy. He's getting small rings on acrylic pen blanks. Is it the tools, or is there a vibration in the mandrel, or could it be him, or all of the above?
Small rings. I'm guessing on the acrylic. So with acrylics, if you're turning them a lot of the time, turning with at high speed, if you're rubbing the bevel, bevel can produce heat, and that can produce a little white ring. It's very, very difficult then to sand away. Also, if you're sanding too fast, the same thing can happen. You can get a little white ring form. I'm guessing that's what you'll mean when you get into the finer stages. You're getting those white rings that when you rub your nail over it, you can feel. That is just a little bit of that dust has melted and then bound itself, almost welded itself back to the acrylic. So what I would do there is go back to a coarse grade or coarser grade to take that away, and then re-wet sand again. That's probably it. But Ben, the pen's right here, so he would do confer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Concur, sorry.
Andy's asked again, is there a quick way of getting rid of very fine sanding scratches? And I'd second what Colwin says, is to go back a grit and perhaps use a little bit of water on the abrasive, so try and flush out some of that acrylic dust.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just using dry abrasive, then I would certainly make sure that you go to something like Micro Mesh, and they go right the way up to 12,000 grit as well. So I would tend to look at that, tend to go for something finer. All right. Right, one more cut. I'm going to make that famous one more cut. We're just going to do a little finishing cut on the bottom. There we are, and I think that's enough. We are going to sand this. So, I was questioning whether to sand it because Ben's going to mark it and carve it and all those sorts of things. But I think for marking out with, with the carbon paper and things like that, then if it's a sanded surface, it'll be a little bit easier. So we are going to go over the sanding. So I'll do the same thing. We'll go over with 150 and then work our way through the rotary sander as well. So extraction going on, Mo. So same thing, we'll start off with the 150. And you can see, I don't know whether the camera can pick it out, but you've got some little rotary lines here. They're all turning lines. And I keep sanding with this coarse abrasive until they've gone. Oh, I know I've done the outside edge, but I'll do it again. Just to make sure. Double check. I don't want any tears there at this stage. They need to have been gone. Turning lines needs to disappear. Then we're going to go to a 180. And we're getting rid of all those hand sanding marks by doing this. Have a check. There we're good. So we'll go 240. $240. And then finally, just by hand with some 400 grit. There we are, and that should do it. So if I wanted to come straight off the lathe now and work on this, so if it's me, I'm in a fortunate position. I've got Ben. He's going to do all the decorating. But if you want to work on the bench, say for instance, or the lathe, sorry, say for instance now, I just wanted to map that out for Ben. All I would do is take this one off. This is the pro mount that both of us are going to use. So take the chuck, including the bowl off, just to give us a nice way of working. So as long as I don't drop it on the floor, I can take that off and screw straight onto my pro mount now. And I've got, the ability of having something that's movable on the lathe. If I can undo him. It's better. I can move it around. I can swivel it around in the lathe and just make it easy. You know what it's like when you're trying to work on something and it's moving all over the place. And carving vices are exactly the same. They're notorious for it. But this gives us something, first of all, something nice as a platform that I'm not bending over. So it's at my height anyway. I'll put the carbon paper on there. We can sketch around it, and then you can start burning. You can start doing your carving. Ben, I believe, is going to do this tomorrow seated, but we're going to keep it in the pro mount and put it onto the bench mount to make it easier for Ben. But there we are. That was that bowl. So let's go for a few questions now.
Okay, so a question from Ken. Are you using the soft or the hard bowl sander?
Oh, I didn't know there was a difference. Sorry, Ken. So this is the deluxe, the Axminster deluxe. There's two of that, 275 mils, 250s. I thought they were both the same, if I'm honest. It's quite soft. It's quite squidgy, but it's not like foam. It's very dense, dense pad.
And then a question from James. When changing over from the faceplate to the chuck, he's having to reshape the outside a bit as it's vibrating. Is that because his tenon isn't good, or will it always be a bit out?
It really depends. So there's so many factors when it comes to reversing. If you talk to any engineer, they say the piece that you're working on does not leave the chuck until it's absolutely finished and parted off. As wood turners, we don't do that. We're always moving stuff all over the place. The trouble is with timber, yeah, it might be dense, but it's still softer than a set of jaws in a chuck, and you'll compress those soft fibers, the side fibers that are, you know, compared to the end fibers. We just saw the difference there between the working attributes of both parts of the timber. So the side is soft, the end is hard, and so you're clamping 4 pieces of metal onto a soft bit of timber. It will move. Some timbers more than others. The denser the timber, the less trouble you have. Yes, a crisp foot does make a difference, and clean jaws make a difference as well. But no, generally, if I'm doing a very big piece, say for instance a big ash platter, then there will be occasions where I'll have to just tap it right. But you can do a lot to minimize that. Like we were saying, clean feet, clean jaws. Yeah.
And then a question from Chris: can the Pro Mount articulate so you can work on the bottom side of the bowl, bottom or the side of the bowl?
The bottom or the side. Well, it will articulate enough to it's the wrong way around. It will go down as far as your bowl will allow it. So there we are. Let me just turn it around so you can see. It will go around as far as that. I can lock that up. Obviously, it can't tip all the way down because we've got the bottom here in the way. But apart from, go to number 3. That 3, Jace. That's it. Perfect. So that's as far as it'll go. I can't go any further because I've got the banjo tool rest in the way here. But then at this point, we can swivel that around as well, so the whole bowl will rotate around. But yes, there we are. I keep getting this around the wrong way. There we are. It's better. I prefer to have it facing. You can almost eat your dinner off it, can you? Any more, Ben?
That's it.
That's it. Okay, guys. Well, look, tomorrow we're going to finish this. Rather, Ben's going to finish this. He's going to mark it out. He's going to do the topography. He's going to do some carving on it and show you exactly what the Ammonite bowl will look like when finished. So thanks ever so much for your support. Look forward to tomorrow seeing you at the same time, same place at 3 o'clock with Ben on the topography bowl. So thanks again. Bye-bye for now.